I'm going to speak in English. Can you all understand English? Okay. Did he say good stuff about me or bad stuff? I have no idea. I'm going to talk to you about the way we think. I thought it would be useful to talk a little bit about my agency and a little bit about the work that we've done, and I'm going to use case examples to explain theories. But also I think these days it's as much about what you think and how the world is changing and how brands fit into that world. So I've called it the way we think, and miraculously, here we go. And what we do at Turner Duckworth, and I'm the Duckworth part of Turner Duckworth, we design iconic visual identities and packaging for consumer brands. We don't do any business-to-business work at all. We just work on consumer brands. And you'll have noticed there we work on things like Levi's, we work on Coca-Cola, for North America only. And then we also work for smaller companies and own label companies. This is Waitrose, this is Metallica, and you can see over there Liz Earle, which is a kind of a beauty company. First, I'll tell you a little bit about us as an agency. We started 21 years ago, and we're split by 5,000 miles or so. So I'm a British graphic designer, and I met my partner, David Turner, who's also a British graphic designer. And within, I don't know, 3 weeks of starting, he said to me, I've met this girl, and she lives in San Francisco. I want to go out and live with her for a while, see if she's the one. And so for 21 years, 21 years ago that happened, and so David now runs a studio in San Francisco. We work together like a partnership on everything that we do. So we're still like a partnership in one office, but we just do it across so we have a very long desk. And we have about sort of 70-odd people. Everything we work on, we work together. We collaborate on everything. This is a little example of how collaboration works. Okay, this is our Christmas card from 2 years ago. It's one Christmas card. It comes from both studios. Okay, so it has to say something about London, something about San Francisco. So this is the London skyline. You'll recognize Big Ben, the Post Office Tower, the Gherkin. And then we sent this one from London, and then we turned it upside down, and we sent this one from San Francisco. So you can see the Transamerica building, the Golden Gate Bridge, the skyline's changed, and the snow has become little twinkling lights in the skyline. So everything we do together. This is a theory we have about the way we think about brands. Brands have changed. When we first started, we were literally a packaging design company. For years and years, we really just did packaging. But as the world has changed, and as Facebook comes along, and everything else comes along, packaging and design is having a much more important part in the center of a brand's world. So this is a theory about how we think about brands. And then I'm going to explain to you how that affects the work that we do. And I've got 7 key points that I want you to take away, and maybe they'll help you. Maybe you just think they're just terrible, I'll forget them. But let's see. So the way we think about brands is that I think brands have had a big shift from the 20th century to the 21st century. In the 20th century, brands and the business were distinct entities. They weren't the same. And I think these days, the brand is the business. And if you take 2 examples, if you think of Lever Brothers making soap, okay, they have one factory, and they make soap flakes, soap bars, soap liquid. Right, in the 20th century, they marketed them all as different brand names, and although it's the same product, they marketed them all differently. And it was like there was they were pretending that they had lots of different brands. And then you think of a brand that is like Facebook, like a modern 21st century brand like Google. We know everything about those companies. There's no protection, there's no facade to hide behind. And I think there's a big change that's happening. So in the old brands were all about secrecy and opaqueness, and they were hiding their true values behind a wall. But these days you can't do that because people find out. So you have to be open and transparent. It used to be all about just images and impressions, the same thing. The 20th century brands, the same graphic elements, just repeated time after time. But these days it's changed. It's more about experiences and entities. The only form of communication in the old days was advertising. The more money you had, the more impressions you could make on people. But these days, everything you do is communication of some description. So the world is changed, and the brands need to change because of that. It used to be the more money you had, the more advertising you could spend, the more attention you got, the more success you had. But it doesn't work that way anymore. If you have stuff that's good, if design is good, it gets shared, and it has this enormous value. Everything used to be so controlled. It was like, you know, if you have a logo, you have to use it in a particular way. And, you know, these days it's different, right? Everything has to be, there's many more collaborations. Everything has to be kind of cohesive. It has to hold together as an entity. It doesn't necessarily have to be absolutely consistent. I know you Germans are going to find that hard to take. And it used to be all about just tell me, you know, it was like a pushing these messages out to people, and these days it's not. It's about the way the company acts and the way the brand acts, and that is what the impression of the brand is. So the kind of, if you like, the summary of that is that it used to be that a brand was a facade. It was like a Western town, you know, where you have a big, a sort of impressive front, but around the back it's just a tiny little place. And these days I think really good, successful brands are like cultures, okay? So we think that really 21st century brands are like cultures. And if you look at anthropology, all right, which is the study of humans and sociology, you find out that that there's a word for this they call material culture. This is an interesting, if you look at a culture and the definition of what cultures do, they're groups of people making and doing things, they have ideologies, beliefs, things they value, they have traditions, skills, talents, technologies, relationships with other cultures. Sometimes they hate them and fight them, sometimes they love them and collaborate with them. They create stuff, they have what we would call a material culture. That's what anthropologists call it. The stuff that cultures leave behind is called a material culture. And their material culture reflects the things that they value. Now you could change that word, I think, for brands, and it's exactly the same in the 21st century, and this is the way we think about brands. So we know everything about Google. We know absolutely everything. They tell us their values, they show us their server room, they tell us their philosophy, they put their philosophy, everybody knows everything about it, and there's not this sort of singular message they're trying to get out the whole time. Look, their logo changes every day. It's a different way of thinking. It used to be, I think, that you had a cultural value that then transmitted itself really through design to what we would call a material culture. So the things that are produced by every brand is what we call a material culture. And that is a reflection of the things that the culture values, okay, the values. But of course, most people never get to meet the owners of the company. They don't know the brand manual. They don't see the big corporate statements from the companies. So the material culture is all they experience. And that actually reflects back onto the company. So if you think you're, as a brand you stand for something, yet your material culture doesn't display that exactly, then consumers look back from the material culture and they look back at your culture and they say, this is different, you know, it's different. And there's been a mismatch. So let me explain further. This isn't about design, this is about Anglo-Saxon culture. Okay, so you can't find an Anglo-Saxon that's still alive, they're all dead. But anthropologists, when they look at Anglo-Saxon culture, they look at the artifacts they've left behind, and they tell you that's how they find out what it was like to be an Anglo-Saxon. So if they only found one thing, if they had one consistent message, it would probably be this. It would be a helmet, because these are artifacts that are found all the time. So we know that they were heroes of war and they valued strength from what they leave behind. But actually, when you look at their culture, it's a very broad thing. They weren't only about war, they were about love, and there was a market economy. They loved beauty and typography and education. They were skilled craftsmen. They enjoyed playing and partying. And this makes for a rich culture. Okay, and that's what I've never met an Anglo-Saxon, so all I know is what they find, their material culture. The way we think about design is that we design the material culture of a brand. So this is Waitrose, okay? We just work on the packaging. There's a couple of pieces there, and the rest of it's done by other people. But as a consumer, this is a UK grocery supermarket. As a consumer, you see The packaging celebrates ingredients. You know, we know they love food. They hand out food like a delicatessen in the store. They make their bags out of natural materials that are recyclable. So you can start to sort of understand a bit more like the culture of the brand, what they stand for. We know that when they open a small store, they call it a little Waitrose. And that's kind of a little bit funny, so we know they have a sense of humor. And this is what you should be thinking all the time when you're creating design for brands, that you are creating the material culture which will reflect back onto that brand. And the broader and the more interesting the design work you do, the better it reflects on the brand. So I bet you've never seen a slide like this, Anglo-Saxons compared with a grocery. But it's true. This is the way we think. So that's what we do. As designers, we help create the material culture of the brand. Here's some things we've learned. I'm going to be testing on you on these later. So the first one is that when you create an identity, a brand identity for a consumer brand, you should think about cohesive things sticking together. Okay, there needs to be consistency but flexibility. So this is the work we do for Coca-Cola in North America. This is very uncorporate. The top, there's 4 pieces of packaging at the top are very uncorporate, right? You know, but what is the point of taking something like that middle can, which is the classic can, and just taking that graphic and putting it on the big can, and it doesn't fit properly. It just looks awful. If you're after a big can of Coke, then you're after a big can of Coke, so make it look like a big can of Coke. If you're after a little one there, the little can is about the same size as the iconic contour bottle, then it can have a different expression. It doesn't have to be the same. Every time you approach the brand, everything you design should have a relevancy for that particular context. So these cups, as you drink to the straw, the level goes down. The trucks have got a sense of humor to them and a graphic simplicity and wit. Even the basket there for the picnic is made up of little mini Coke bottles, and of course this is a special edition summer can. I've got a little video here of everything that we've done up till a few years ago for Coke, so I'll play this now. Let's hope it works. So that's the kind of breadth, if you like, You know when we were talking about those Anglo-Saxons and this sort of rich culture because different things say different things at different times? This is what we're trying to create with Coke. Coke's a big, massive, obviously huge company. But I think by doing things that are creating design that is contextually relevant when you come to it, and it says something slightly different every time, it makes for a richer picture. This is only available in North America, by the way. And I don't know why it's not available here. And the special editions keep coming, right? So this is this kind of feeling of wit and a little bit funny, but not too funny. This is my favorite piece we've done for Coca-Cola. It was the summer 2011 promotion, and it ends up on cans, in special edition cans, collectible cans, and also on merchandise as well. And I think if you have a good idea, that can happen. This is Arctic Home. This is this winter promotion 2011, including a rather fetching hat. This is the Olympics, the Winter Olympics for Vancouver. I mean, interesting here, this is where packaging, I think, it comes into its own, is that often the lead times for design are so much longer than for advertising, that often the design for this is done before the ad agency have thought of their idea. They're too busy having lunch. So this is actually a commercial that was run for the same the packaging design promotion. So you can see that the design then influences the advertising rather than the other way around, which is interesting. We've been doing, this is London Olympics 2012, this is for it's obviously the US market. And this is just finished. This is for the Sochi Winter Olympics. You can see the kind of graphic language has evolved a little bit more. You know, we're working on this. We've been working on it for about 7 years now, and we keep trying to do good things. We still want to win Grand Prix at Cannes, you know. So we still have to try as hard as we possibly can and keep it interesting, keep it different and flexible. That's the key thing with them. So we often find that point number 2. That there's an iconic core is often, an unmistakable core is a really important thing. This is the redesign we did for Levi Strauss. We've actually removed the words Levi's from that back wing shape. That shape is the same shape as the stitching on the back of the pockets of your jeans. And this is going to become an iconic mark, we hope, a little bit like maybe the Apple icon, where the words aren't as important as the visual. Like you can represent Nike with a swoosh and Apple with an apple and Levi's with this. That's what we're hoping, and this is particularly relevant when you go into, you know, Chinese markets or somewhere where actually they don't even speak the same language or even recognize the same character forms. And that then forms the style of everything that you do. So that shape then goes into that, you know, this is the leather patch on the back of the jeans. It's the same shape. Everything fits the same design, and then you can disassemble the various elements and use them, like for example on the back of a business card there, that's what they call the 2-horse pull. But then when you have a sort of iconic, a very simple iconic element, you can then create a brand that has breadth. That's what we keep wanting to do, is keep it looking similar but have breadth. These are the brand guidelines down here. You know, Levi's is all about pioneering. It was Levi Strauss first designed their jeans for the gold rush when they all moved to San Francisco with the gold rush. And so the brand guidelines are on this huge fold-out map, you know, which references those sort of pioneering days of going across America. Packaging is often the part that starts the visual identity from. Sometimes, you know, brands don't have any money. This is just a wine bottle. It's never going to have an advertising budget. It's just a one-off product. So packaging tends to be everything. Neal's Yard, you know, is not kind of big enough to have a huge TV budget. So the packaging forms the basis of all of their visual identity. And you think, well, why is packaging so important in a consumer brand? Well, it's pretty obvious, actually. But packaging is essential. You can't live without it. So there may be other forms of media that are going to disappear with digital and everything else, but you can't get a beer to a table without a piece of packaging. You can't get it from a brewery to your table without a piece of packaging. You can't miss it. And it's an incredibly effective piece of communication. Like for Coca-Cola, I found out this out on Wikipedia, so it's probably a little bit wrong. But they sell 1.8 billion servings of Coca-Cola every single day. And every serving, or couple of servings, comes in a piece of packaging. And that is 1.8 billion opportunities to say something good about Coca-Cola. And advertising agencies, they talk about, target markets and huge audiences. And the biggest TV audience that I could find was in the TV ad break in the middle of the Super Bowl 2014 was 112 million people. So that is the biggest audience you can reach, okay? But really, in packaging, you're reaching 1.8 billion every day if you just make it good. And that, it's very good value because of that. And when you think that 112 million watching the Super Bowl, the price of 30 seconds to talk to them is $4 million for 30 seconds. That's what Coca-Cola apparently paid. I mean, we should all get paid more, right? Because of this kind of breadth of culture that we're talking about, every single detail counts. This is an identity, and we worked on this brand for 15 years. I was their creative director, and it's a naturally active skincare brand, so it's a women's skincare brand that uses natural ingredients that have a sort of biological, different, healthy effect on your skin. That's the logo we designed for them. And then every touch point is interesting, and it's a richer culture than just stamping the same thing on it time and time again. Even, that's a Christmas packaging at the top up there. What looks like a snowflake is in fact one of their ingredients. If you cut it through the middle, it's this is like a spiky plant, and it looks like a snowflake, but it's all to do with naturally active skincare. Design shouldn't be surface, it should be rich and rewarding. And it should give you a reward back for looking at it and interacting with it. This is a project we did. This has just come out. This is for Drip Coffee and Ice Cream. They're an ice cream and artisan ice cream and coffee company. You can see the packaging is kind of interesting. This is like a bowl where you eat your ice cream out of. The typography on the Drip logo is very delicious. And when you're talking about a competition, something like Starbucks, you have to be different. You can't just be corporate. You have to have more depth. So we produced a series of posters to talk about that they put up in their store and they give away to customers with all their different messages on. So from a different type of blend of coffee to kind of fun stuff, rocket fuel, a cure for crankiness. These are posters, silkscreen printed posters, and this is, they're fun. They have an element of wit and intrigue, but they're very, very simple, very graphic, and they don't rely on you having to read loads of funny copy or anything like that. They're just very visual. And we've produced, I don't know, lots, maybe 15. This is a Black Cat coffee. This is ice cream for ice cream. They're fun and interesting, and together they make a much richer story. Often our work, people say, oh, I love your work because it's so simple. But I just want to tell you that it isn't. Simplicity alone is just not enough in design, I don't believe. If this is as simple as a piece of packaging can probably get. So it tells you what it is, honey. It's either solid, pure set, or it's runny, which they call pure clear. And it comes from the store, which is called Waitrose. That's simplicity, okay, but it's boring. You don't have to do much to turn it into something a little bit more interesting. Okay, so a little bit of cleverness, a little bit of the E turns into the bumblebee. I mean, it's not like rocket science, but it just makes you feel a little bit better about Waitrose, right? It reflects the value from the material culture back onto the brand. And because of that, it gives the consumer a reward for buying it. It's just nicer, right? It's a better thing. So simplicity is not enough. It has to have an element of delight, something, an idea as well. Something we've come across a lot recently as we're working on these much bigger brands like Coke, and we're working on all sorts of very, very big ones at the moment, that often they come with a legacy of graphic design. Coca-Cola, for example, has a wonderful design history. It's lost its way a few times, but it does have a wonderful legacy. And so often the answers to the problems often lie in the past, and going through the archive and the background, understanding the brand from where it started is really, really important. And we often use examples to explain to our clients what we're trying to do. So it's very difficult, I think, sometimes to, often as a graphic designer, you're asked to, when you redesign a piece of packaging or a piece of communication, they say, can you tell us more about this? They keep adding communication. And every time they add communication, they add another element to the design. And gradually, after a while, the design just kind of crumbles in the weight of communication you have to do. So we found it very useful to be able to look at other people's worlds that are different to the client's world and explain what we're trying to do in a sort of broader context to give them an analogy of what we're trying to do. And when we try to look back at the future, we often use this example. This is a good German here, Ulrich Behr's, heritage is history with a future. It's a great quote. And really, he's done a brilliant job because he's taken what was iconic, and he's taken design elements that were brilliant about this famous car, like the radiator grille and the air intake on that wing, and he's turned it into something which is a modern-day, beautiful object. And that's what I think you have to do with brands that are historic. You have to turn them into something that is relevant for today, not just keep them in the past. So here's an example. This is a brand. We did not design this. This is the one before. It's called Conte à Paris. Conte à Paris, they make artist materials, sketching pencils, crayons, colors, and they're for professionals, right? But look at this. It's been around since 1795. Look at that packaging. This is not a professional artist brand, right? If you're a professional artist and you did a portrait like that, you wouldn't be professional for very long. So what they really should do, this packaging, the whole brand identity, should inspire people. It was created by the man who invented, Mr. Conte, who invented the product. He invented graphite pencils in 1795 in Paris, the greatest city for inspiring artists. So we look back in the future, we look back to try and find what the future was, and we found this little pencil in the archive. It had a beautiful bit of type. Sorry it's so crunchy, but it's a beautiful piece of type, almost worn out. So we redesigned it. And then we looked at Paris and we said, we don't want to show what other artists do. What you want as an artist is to be inspired to draw, to be inspired to paint. So we looked around. Paris is the most beautiful place. All these great images from just photographing Paris. And then combine that together to create the packaging. This is the redesign. And it's a tin, so it's a product that artists would enjoy. It's a beautifully crafted thing. It has a paper band that wraps all the way around that you can remove, and it reveals these collectible scenes of Paris. And every time you see one, it has a relevance. So the portrait set uses the statue. This is the flower set, so it's got all of this is all the colours, so it's got the flower market. The rusty colour there is those locks that everybody the lovers put on the gates in Paris. Everything has a relevance. So if you ever wanted to draw a black cat on a black road, you need a black crayon. That's the one. If you ever wanted to draw a Sacré-Cœur, it's a white building, so you need white ones. That's what it's there for. This is the trash can, and that is the eraser. I'm going to show you a little bit of Metallica here. So this is, we found that if you have it's really, really worth having a good idea. If you have a good idea, it just opens the world up to all sorts of possibilities. Sometimes I think people talk about having a big idea, and a big idea seems so difficult to create for something like Coca-Cola. How do you create a big idea for Coca-Cola? It's been around for 125 years. And I think our work for Coca-Cola actually isn't a big idea. I think it's lots of small ideas, which add up to create an impression of a brand with more depth than it did before. But this is an example, right? So this is for Metallica. So we were asked to design the album cover for the latest, I think it's actually they've done one since, Death Magnetic. And so the album is called Death Magnetic. It was a return to form. So Metallica had been incredible. They're the biggest rock heavy metal band in the world. And they'd lost a little bit of form. And people were saying they weren't as good as they were, so they had a return to form album. And we could design everything for them. This is the logo, the original logo that James Hetfield, who's there, he's the singer and lead guitarist. he designed this himself. And it really just talk about sort of aggression, and yes, there's a few typographic kind of weirdnesses in there, which is maybe you want to sort out, but it means, it means Metallica. And the album and the logo that they had ended up with when we started working with them was this one, which really was a bit like them, maybe a little bit like their music. They kind of lost their passion a little bit. So when we redesigned their logo, we went back to where it came from originally, and gave much more kind of aggression to the M and the A of Metallica, and then sorted the odd typographic details out in the middle. And then the album was in the same style, so called Death Magnetic. You can see there that there are two magnets, one on each end, that are attracting the sort of energy of Metallica. So that gave us some brand marks, and then we had other iconography. So we summed it all up in something that actually wasn't words at all. It was just the symbol of Death Magnetic from Metallica. And that meant that we could use those elements on different elements. So the album cover, this is the 12-inch vinyls. It's a big collector's box. The whole album is about death, as you'd expect. So everywhere, every scene they see, they always see death in it. So that's the view from our San Francisco office roof with a grave in the middle of it. This is a special edition box, which opens up with a DVD, a CD, and a backstage pass, and this huge flag. Everybody needs a huge Metallica flag. and then it gives you the sort of the equipment to be able to do all the tour gear. We didn't do this, the Leitung designers did this, but you can see how the graphic design influenced everything. Right down to the album cover. This is the CD cover, which is like a book. And it was really based on that old science experiment. You know the one you did at school when you put iron filings over a magnet, and it kind of sucks the iron filings. It looks like it's sucking the earth back down into the grave. And as you opened it up, it was a book, and every page you went through was the lyrics, and it got closer and closer to the CD. That's our art worker, by the way. He's a nice-looking guy. But you get a suite, right? It's not just the same thing repeated. It's different, and it's richer, and it's more interesting. And, and people liked it. So you don't get this very often, right? I mean, that looks really painful. And we didn't even do this one. They did it themselves. I don't know. It's not in the brand guideline, that. So the last point is, I mean, we all know this, but if it doesn't spread, it's dead. We have to design things these days that have a life beyond just a piece of packaging. It has to be photogenic. People have to look at it and love it to be able to share it. It's a great opportunity we have as designers to create beautiful, wonderful, photogenic things. This is our redesign of Diet Coke. I know here it's called Coca-Cola Light, but in America it's a standalone brand. You can see it's dramatic, it's impactful, and people take photographs. That's somebody's holiday somewhere, I don't know where. But because it's attractive, I think people notice it and they want to share it. And you've heard from Facebook, right? That's a fantastic thing. And we also then took that onto this is the latest album we just did for Metallica, which is called Through the Never, and it's the soundtrack to their film that's just come out. And to try and get this interactivity together, it comes with a stencil that then you can take the stencil off the front cover and you can, be creative with it. And people are, this is all, what they've posted online, and there's a whole kind of social aspect to this design. This is the little movie of what it's like. Turn the music up, it's Metallica. So there's just to remind you a few things then. So you need to have dimension, cohesion, flexibility. There has to be something iconic in the middle of it all. Everything says something about your brand. You've got to make it, all the details count. Make it rich and rewarding. And finally, do something worth remembering, just like Elvis did. That's me.